And here is Johnny on the Spot.
Get to know this icon of children's music. Disney, Sony Music, thousands of international live performances, and much more. Meet Dan Crow. Well, welcome to the inaugural show of Johnny on the Spot. I'm Johnny. This is The Spot, brought to you by Turtleneck Productions, because I have a turtleneck.
Oh, was I supposed to wear one too?
Yeah. And you're probably wondering, who is that handsome gentleman over there next to me? Well, he is our first guest, and hopefully not our last guest. This is Dan Crow, world-renowned performer for children, families, and anybody who will listen, and very talented. We're going to find out all about this young man as we turn the show off. Dan Crow, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's good to be here, and I just want to show you my T-shirt says, "Please accept my resignation." Groucho Marx, because it says I don't want to belong to any club that will accept me as a member.
Boy, I followed that faithfully. That's great. So listen, Dan, I've known you since it's got to be the early mid-70s, right?
Yeah, it was 70. I think it was 76, 77, because we had just moved out to LA in 76. Lucinda was accepted to graduate school at UCLA in library science, and they didn't have a program in New Mexico where we were living at the time. So she got to pay in-state tuition and go to graduate school at UCLA. So that brought us out to LA in 76. And then I was in 77 that I contacted you and Pam and Marcia Berman about maybe coming, because you guys were running those concerts at McCabe's.
Yeah.
The kids' concerts, and I was curious about getting on that bill and seeing because I had been writing for kids before that, but really not. And I had done some shows, but was back out and just moving to LA, wanted to tap into that market. That's when we met.
I think we were doing those shows at that time with Marcia Berman.
Yeah, you were.
Right?
Actually, who told you guys about me was Fred Sokolow, because wow. Fred's kids went to that elementary school where I was working. I was a reading assistant. I was an aide because I'd already been teaching before that, but I didn't have time to commit to being a full-time teacher because I was trying to sell songs and things. So I got part-time jobs, and one of them was at John Muir Elementary School in Santa Monica, and that's where Fred Sokolow's kids went to. And then Fred was friends already with Marcia. And I don't know if you knew Fred then. Did you know him then?
I think we knew him peripherally. He lived in a town called Peripherally, as a matter of fact.
That's right, a little suburb of Santa Monica.
I used to be a hearing aid back then. I would climb into people's ears that were oversized.
Yeah,
but that's a whole other story. Yeah, Fred, and gosh, because I remember performing, but I think Ash Grove and stuff like that was going on at the same time. Some stuff on the pier, Santa Monica piers, whatnot.
I remember we did a show out there, did we not? I can't.
Yeah,
remember that
but there's a picture. There's some photographs of us outside or something after they kicked us out. No, they didn't kick us out.
Yeah, right. Well, we met all those people. Everybody met everybody right around the same time, because you guys came over to see me perform in a classroom at John Muir Elementary. I remember that, and that was kind of my showcase to and to see if I could get a job at Santa Monica, and that's how I met you and Marcia Berman. And then, of course, right after that, Marcia introduced me to Patty Zaitlin, and
Yeah.
then Patty introduced me to Uncle Ruthie. So that all came.
You were passed around like a little rag doll, weren't you?
I was funny because I was doing that. I told you that part-time job. I was doing that thing with at John Muir Elementary as a reading aide, and then I was also doing another part-time job cleaning at a little the preschool daycare center in Santa Monica. That was at night. So I would go clean to custodial work that night, and they had records there, and I would listen to Patty's and Marcia's albums and Pat Palmer, and and then that's how I got kind of excited. Then when I got to work with them and meet them and write together and all that stuff, that was pretty cool. After doing that in the beginning, I did learn how to. I did learn how to run one of those, those wax machines. Those things that's a real art to them.
They're almost prehistoric.
They are now, exactly. They still use them though. I still see them around the schools.
In the Wayback Machine, you were born where?
Oh, and born in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, were you? Okay,
I didn't know. I was born as a baby, which was that was easier on my mom.
Did you have swaddling clothes on, or whatever they call it?
I was born with swaddling clothes. Yeah, puddling clothes.
So Columbus, Ohio. Okay. Now, what were your parents doing there?
Oh, my dad grew up there, and he was from there, and then so my grandparents were there, and aunts and uncles, and so after he got out of the service, after he came back to Columbus and married my mom, they had gone to high school together in Columbus there, and so when they were 2 years apart, he was two years older. But as soon as he got out of the service, they got married, like within a couple of weeks after he got home from Europe, from after the World War II.
And you were born like what, 7 months later?
Yeah, 7, right, exactly. It was early. And I had it all to myself for 2 years until my doggone sister came along. Dang it.
Oh, man, you were getting Christmas presents and all kinds of good stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
So your sister is 2 years behind you, and her name is
Tana, Tana. We always thought it'd be cool when there's that restaurant, called Dan Tana's, and Dan Tana was a character I think in one TV show. So we are Dan Tana.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I know you guys are still good friends to this very day.
Oh no, no, not ever. Of course we are. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, throw that chapter out. Not at all. No, we're real close, and she's not. I don't get to see her as often as we'd like to, but anyway, she's up in Wisconsin now. But she loves coming back to Colorado because that's what we ended up doing when I was about 4 or 5. My dad he didn't want to raise us around the grandparents and all the family in Columbus. So he had an adventuresome spirit, after having been in North Africa and Italy and Germany and France during the war. He just decided, I'm not going to have my kids be influenced by this family. So my mom and I and my sister and I.
Family sounds like it was the Ted Bundy family.
Exactly. They were good people, but he just knew what was going to happen. He was wise enough to know, I'm going to get him out of the state. So we went to Colorado. That's where we ended up moving out there.
Did you? What is? This is intriguing me the older I get. What is your earliest memory?
Oh, of the move, you mean? Or
just of in your life of being a little Dan.
Oh, it's funny you say. It was a good question because I'm actually looking at some of the memories right now. I'll even pull one off the wall and show you here. When I was right before we moved from Columbus, when I was around 4, it was doing these little drawings. I did these animal drawings. Let me pull one off and I'll show you one. Here's one. And so
you were 4 years old at this time?
This is one of them right there.
Oh, wow.
You can see that. Okay, now
it looks very similar to those cave drawings on the walls of the
isn't it? Yeah. And when I was doing these drawings,
wow, that's cool.
I did them just, because I was a young kid just loving to draw. And
Yeah.
my Uncle Bob, who's a well-known artist, Bob Clay, became a sculptor and a painter and everything. He saw those drawings and he painted them. He wanted to paint them. So he made that piece of artwork that I just showed you based on those little sketches that I did.
Wow.
That was really a powerful memory for me. And he was always my favorite uncle my whole life, or his whole life, because he was such a cool guy. He was an artist and a jazz drummer and everything. So the
So
music,
you're kind of a Renaissance man.
yeah, and my
inspiration.
mom's brother. So he was cool. So that's one of those really powerful memories. I remember doing those little sketches. I got 3 or 4 other ones here, but that was an example.
Yeah. Oh, it's extremely
Mostly animals, all animals. They're lions and elephants and cats and dogs and horses and birds. Yeah. So.
They could have done some psychological testing on you at that time, but I guess they just went with it.
Yeah, I think they should have done some psychological testing, because I'm certainly been off the tracks my whole life.
Oh, you do like it. You do like animals. That's good.
Well, yeah, exactly. They're
So you were in Colorado. You're going to school. How long were you in Colorado? Because I know I want to get into your athletic career in school.
Oh yeah. Well, when we moved to Denver. We moved to Denver first, and then we moved into Aurora, which was just a little tiny suburb of Denver at that time. And that's where I started, because we were old enough. We were just at the age to start kindergarten. So my sister was a little behind, of course, but so all those, I stayed there all the way through school in our little house in Aurora. It's funny thinking about this, because we had some family in town last weekend from Denver, my niece and her husband, and they just bought a home in Aurora just a few years ago, and we were looking up my old house, 10102 East 7th Avenue in Aurora.
Yeah,
where I grew up, and when we moved there, I was in about first grade or second grade, and I just saw where that house last year sold for $395,000.
Oh,
And my view,
10102 East 7th Avenue. That's where I grew up to be a kid. 10102 East 7th Avenue. Now let me tell you all the things we did. Hey, we played.
and my folks bought it for, I think, $8,000 or something like that, when they got it. And it's not really, it's just a nice little dumpy little house. It's not a fancy house by any means, but it's in Colorado, and everything there has gone up so much. So that shocked me.
it's funny. What it reminds me, when we came down to LA, I was working at a record warehouse, and we were renting a place. We had a roommate, Russell Champlin, who I hope I get to interview him. He's a barrel and of laughs. And he pointed out where we used to live on Lindley, and he looked it up on Zillow and sent it to me. And again, nothing to write home about. $1 million in Tarzana. Used to be a house owned by Edgar Rice Burroughs. A little bit of a.
Whoa, very cool.
I read all of his Tarzan and all of his
Yeah, sure.
Gardner books and all that. So that was kind of a treat,
Yeah, he was. Wasn't he kind of a cheetah in school? He was a cheetah.
He was a big cheetah. Yeah, he was always monkeying around. Did you? So you? We move ahead. How's elementary school? Pretty straight ahead.
Straight ahead. Yeah,
You got into high school. You got into athletics, because at that time, of course, everybody tried to go for teams and.
True. Yeah. Well, my dad was an athletic guy. Was he an
athletic supporter?
Yes, he was. Absolutely. He was a jock. He was. He took. When he was in high school, he was all city and Columbus football player.
Wow.
and then he went and he got a scholarship to Ohio State, and he played there for a couple of years. And before then the war started, and then of course he left to go to Europe. But so he was always an influence on me sports wise, and for football especially, when he coached baseball too. So I was really fascinated about football as a kid, and so I played young American League football from the time I was in like third grade through sixth grade or something, and or fifth grade, and I did start then then I played a little bit of football in high school, but I discovered that I really liked not getting hit that much, so I decided to go into track and field and cross country. So thank God I made that decision, because then that's where I started running in high school, and that's where it really started to kick in. I started.
What was your favorite race? What did you run?
I liked running the middle distances. I was a half miler and a miler. Yeah. And back then those, which is now 800 meters and 1500 meters. Yeah. But then it was all mile based stuff. And so all through high school. So we had an all conference. I was all conference cross country and all state, in track. So, wow. So that led to a scholarship. So I got a college scholarship from being a runner in high school. So I went to Northern Colorado University in Greeley, Colorado. That's where.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Now we should probably now, is your dad in politics at this time, or was that later?
Oh no, this was much later. He was working for Minnesota Mutual Life Insurance Company, and well, my mom was home raising us, and so he was an insurance salesman for years.
So she basically had the tougher job.
Definitely. God, isn't that the truth? Well, it was only my sister that gave her a problem. I was very, very easy to raise.
Very compliant, yeah. Yes.
Very compliant, very sweet. So I take no blame for any mental problems.
It's normally the girls. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. We had a collie dog, because that was the Lassie days, and I had a couple of collies growing up, and that was really. Did
you sometimes put your sister down into a well and then say, "Lassie, go find Tana"?
Yes, but I had Blaze was his name. I had Blaze trained to delay any report of that for a week or so. So
she never played hide and seek with you again.
Never again. But he was, it was. We had because then later on he did get. He ran because he got into politics a little bit in the city level and ran for city council, and while I was in, I think, junior high. He got into that, and then all through high school he was in the city council in Aurora there in those days, which was only about 10,000 people, I think, in those days. So, yeah. But anyway, he got the bug. I think the people that worked with him and that associated with him really liked him, and that's why they led him into running for the state senate. Which he did later, and served 12 years in the state senate in Colorado.
Wow, that's a long time. What was your mom doing during this time? Just raising?
She was working for because we were all both grown up, my sister and I, but we were still at the house, of course, because we were in high school, and then in middle school she was, and then so I think they probably. I think she was working for Dr. Cowger, who was our family doctor. She was his assistant. And office manager. And then she worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield for a few years. And then of course, my mom was supporting my dad because of the politics. So even though she didn't enjoy going to all of those events, she did it. She was a real trooper. She said, "Okay, I'll go to this dinner or this beach or whatever." Yeah.
Good for her. So what prompted you to go into the military?
Not the draft.
Yeah.
God, I made a mistake is what I did. I was actually going into
wrong door.
I was teaching exactly. I was teaching school in Virginia, So I had a deferment, because of being a school teacher, and then I got offered. I actually applied for Teacher Corps, which was a similar thing to Peace Corps, but it was a stateside thing, and it was a professional. You get to go to you get a free graduate school, and you teach in the Teacher Corps, and they send you to areas of the country that are in great need of educators and people to work with them, because they're
like Beverly Hills.
Like Beverly Hills, exactly. Yeah, or Brentwood.
Where nobody went into the military.
That's right, exactly. None of them did. And you'd think with my dad being a state senator, I might have gotten a break, but no, he was on my draft board.
Oh no, it's great.
I swear. So I stood no chance of getting any favoritism.
Oh, that's funny.
But what happened was, because after I was teaching in Montana, after I took that Teacher Corps position, I found out that they considered me a graduate student, not a full-time teacher, even though I was.
Yeah.
And so they said, "Oh, you're susceptible to the draft now." So I got the word. I had to go take my physical in Butte, Montana, and then come out. And I realized,
were you part of the lottery?
Yeah, exactly. You bet.
What number did you get?
I was right in the middle, 182 or something like that.
Because I know I was number 20.
Oh yeah,
the number,
wow.
the top 100, they said went for sure. So at that point, you had to scramble. So I had a lot of scrambling to do.
Oh yeah, I guess you did. How did you not go? You're a British citizen, aren't you?
Yeah, British citizen. The only thing I can't do is vote and serve on a jury. That's it. All the rest of it.
But you can serve in the military.
Vietnam, no problem.
Oh God, isn't that crazy?
So I went up to the physical in Oakland. That was a barrel of laughs, speaking of.
Oh, yeah.
And I realized, I thought you go up for the physical, then you come back home. I'm totally oblivious. You come back home, and then they'll send you a note, and and you lollygag your way. You left that physical, walked out of the room onto buses going to Fort Ord. Yeah, there was, and I'm going, okay. My parents are out in the car eating sandwiches that they made, waiting for me to come out. And then I realized that they have all these guys in a big room, and they say, okay, is there anybody who doesn't want to serve in the great United States military? And I think a bunch of guys are going to raise their hand, and I put my hand up and looked around, and there was like one other dude.
Oh, no kidding.
And all the rest of the guys that can't wait to get into artillery and tanks and stuff. Dude, they don't have tanks in Vietnam. So I had to go in and talk to the psychiatrist or a psychologist, probably a psychiatrist, who had heard every story under the sun.
Yep.
And they listen to you like, I go, okay, get out of here. We'll send you and let you know what's going on. Anyways, that's my story. It goes on from there, but that's for another day. But it was for guys our age at that time, it was pivotal. It was a literal life change,
Yeah, and we were, and I was a little bit older because I had already taught school for a couple of years, so I wasn't one of those young 18-year-olds that had a choice of from going to. They might have got in trouble with the law, either going to jail or to go to the army, So but I did figure out that if I was drafted, it would be a different situation than if I enlisted. So they had this thing going on at the time called Volunteer Army, VOLAR. And so I knew if I enlisted for the 2 years instead of getting drafted, they might give me a better break and give me better choices about where I could get to go to serve my time, in the service.
We kind of rolled over you being a teacher. Was that something that you had decided to do? And well, obviously you decided to do it, but it's something that was on your mind when you were going to school?
Yeah, well, kind of, sure. I was thinking about being a teacher, and then I thought about being when I got into school, I started getting interested in vocabulary and in phonics and phonetics. And I realized that, well, maybe I know what, I'll be a speech therapist. So I became a special ed teacher. So I was a speech and hearing therapist when I was in in Virginia for 2 years. Oh, that was a really cool time in Virginia, because that really opened up my musical horizons. That's when everything started to begin
Did you start playing guitar at that point? Or?
Yeah, well, I'd already been playing guitar in high school because we had folk, hoot nannies and everything.
Yeah.
So we were playing folk, and that was a big time for folk music. So the Kingston Trio and Ian Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie and Burl Ives, and we would sing a lot of those folk songs. That was always fun. And Bud and Travis. I later on took guitar lessons from Bud DeShiel, but many years later. But that guitar. Then I went to going to Virginia. I played guitar, and I had met some other fellow musicians, and Jack Wright, and was a good friend. Still in touch with Jack. And he'd be a great interview for you. He started because where I was in Virginia was in the Appalachian Mountains. It was in the hollers in the mountains there. So it was really rich with this old this is where country music actually started, was right near that area in Bristol, Tennessee, and Kingsport, and that Tri-City area in Johnson City. And so that whole area was so rich with country and also old timey music, and so you had bluegrass, old time country musicians that I got to hang out with and know. Some of them, very well known historically, like Doc Boggs and Jack Wright and Jim and Jesse and some of these artists, and the Carter family was from that right down the road too. So that really changed my whole musical perspective. Here I was just singing folk songs, which we thought were folk songs, Tom Dooley and the Greenback Dollar at the time. But then I get out into the area. I moved to the area where, thank God, I was right in the middle of the richest of folk music. That's where it all came from, is from those mountains in Kentucky and Virginia and Tennessee. So I was really fortunate to be influenced by that and be able to. So because I was a speech therapist, I started to write songs for my kids that I was teaching, that I'm working with. And I found that there's two things in speech therapy. If you're a stutterer, or they call it disfluency, then it's proven that if you sing, you won't have that necessarily, that problem, because there's more to the meter of music that helps you speak and helps you learn to get over your stuttering. So that was a very effective way to start me to write songs to help these kids learn things. And then there was articulation. So you have like S's, R's, and L's. I just load up these songs with those sounds so that we could teach a song, and then they would sing it, and then they would help them speak those.
Remember Mel Tillis?
Yeah,
terrible.
Absolutely.
Stuttering, sing, and he was clear as a bell.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the truth. That does happen more often than not. I mean, there are, of course, not all the time, but mostly it does. And that was really kind of magical. So that got me. Then I started just writing a lot of these little songs for kids, and that started that whole process. Like I would just take a letter sound, like the K and the C sound, the hard C, sound. And then I'd get a list of words that had that word, that sound in it, that letter. And then that sound, and I would write a song based on that sound, trying to use as many words as I could that had that sound in it, either at the beginning of the word or the middle of the word or at the end of the word, so that it became a natural part of their speech pattern. So a song like Kiss a Cow was written because of that. That was the...
Okay, let's go.
Kiss a cow, kiss a cow, kiss a cow, kiss a cow, kiss a cow. Kiss a cow, kiss a cow, kiss a cow, kiss a cow, kiss a cow.
Anyway, that really got
I understand also a lot of cows mood better after
speech therapy. There's classes.
They owe it to it. There's a girl out in New Jersey that speaks very highly of you.
I had a private practice for years helping cows learn to speak better, move better.
did you play music while you were in the service?
Call it the Moo Better Blues.
Move. Okay. Did you play guitar at all while you were in the service? Well, I'm sure you played, but were you in like a group or
Not a group.
other people?
While I was in college, we had a group. We did play some rock and roll too. We played garage band stuff, like you did.
Yeah.
And so we would play fraternity parties and things like that, and play Gloria and
Yeah.
whatever. We just
Whatever was happening at the time.
Exactly. And so, but I never, then in Virginia, I was mostly playing with other musicians, but not bands. Just, we were just putting on festivals and working a lot, entertaining with just appreciating the music that was in that area. And Jack Wright was a big part of that because he was from that part of Virginia. He started a record company called June Apple Records that was a big promoter of all of those old blues players and old timey musicians. So that's how I got to meet a lot of those people and watch them record and work with them and stuff too. People would come down from the Northeast, like Mike Seeger was a big promoter of that. From the Seeger family, he would come down and Guy Carolyn, who was, maybe you heard of him, he was a professor from here in California, or out in California, and he would bring his groups out to study that music and that culture, in that part of the country. So that was pretty cool.
When did you meet Lucinda?
In the Army, when I was there, after I got into the Army after a year teaching in Montana, and then I was going to go like you to Fort. I did go to Fort Ord for basic training, but after that, I thought, I don't know where I'm going, because they didn't know where they were going to send you, because they could send you to Vietnam easily and advanced infantry training. And they said, "Oh no, I got my orders. I'll never forget. I read them. I couldn't make them out because they were all acronyms, and it said." SAF, SEE, SEA, WSMR, NM. So, and I asked my drill sergeant, what does this mean? Where am I going? These are my orders. They said, you're going to be with Safeguard Systems and Evaluation Agency as a personnel psychologist at White Sands Missile Range, New Mexico. I said, yeah, baby. There you go. Oh, and it said OJT, on the job training. So that's where I met her.
I think the better story is you met Lucinda in the Mekong Delta. She was a library.
You know what? Let's do another interview next month, and I'll come up with that. We'll do it.
The sliding doors, right?
Right.
Sliding doors.
Yeah, she was working there. She just was there for one summer that I happened to be there, and she happened to be there. And that was just a part-time job because she just got out of school and she was getting ready to move to Oregon or someplace. And we just met during that summer. She was home because she was from Las Cruces and where White Sands Missile Range is. And that's how I met her. And then,
boy, I tell you, this is going to make a lot of 80-something single women upset that you're married.
You're right. Sure, I guess.
But
I'm not there yet.
The truth is, there you are.
Getting close.
Yeah, and it's right around the corner, as they say. But you know what, Dan? May I call you Dan?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
Only 4 times, though. You get 4 times to do it. That's all.
I've already used 2. Okay.
Or 3, as they do in Germany. They always do it 3 because I go over there a lot. So that's how they say 3. You get 3 times.
That's how they do it?
Yeah, that's how you show it. You don't do it this way. You do it this way. Here's the deal. You got an early out if you had a job to go to in civilian life. So I got about a 3-month early out of the Army to go up. So Lucinda and I got to go up to, my folks were building a restaurant and bar up in Colorado, up in the mountains and Red Feather Lakes. And so they said, I said, well, I've got a job. I have to go there because they're opening up this business and I have to be part of the opening of it. Lucinda and I do. So we both went up there to work at that business. And that got me out of the Army 3 months early, which was great. So that's where we spent about 6 or 7 months or 8 months up there working on
Kind of a restaurant, barsy type place.
yeah, up in Red Feather Lakes, about 8,000 feet up in the mountains, and really mostly for fishermen during the summer, and during the winter it was snowmobilers and some cross country skiing. So it was a really popular location just north of Fort Collins. So people wanted to get to the mountains, and that's where we were. And we lived up there, of course, while we were running the
Yeah,
business.
I bet that was kind of cool.
It was, in fact, that the place is still there. The Potbelly Restaurant and Lounge, it's still operating and in Red Feather Lakes, and every now and then we get up there. In fact, that's where we got married. When I was in the Army, we went up to Red Feather Lakes and got married outside in the big rock behind our cabin up there, which was really cool. So our marriage started on the rocks.
It went uphill from there.
Literally.
So you came out to. I want to move into when you came out to California, and you mentioned that Lucinda was going to go to graduate school at UCLA, and you were holding down a couple of jobs, and then kind of built, kind of similar to how our music career went. You kind of goes from one thing to another. You get a break here and there.
Yeah.
And then how did you get connected with the Disney people?
When I was teaching at John Muir Elementary, I met a woman named Elise Vosberg, as she is called now, Elise Vosberg, and she was I don't know, we just kind of hit it off, and she really loved what I did and liked my songs that I wrote for the kids. So she recommended me to a producer over at Disney that she knew, who was in the educational division of Disney.
Mhm.
And because I knew I was there, my songs were intended to be for teaching phonics and early reading skills. That's what I designed them for. She picked up on that, and she recommended me to work with them on some educational projects. So I went over and interviewed them and talked to them, and I got interviewed with them, and they really liked what I had, and they said, "Oh, let's do a project." So we ended up doing. The first one was called. It was a film strip. Remember film strips?
Sure.
It was called Sing Short Vowels with Winnie the Pooh, because of course Disney had all the Winnie the Pooh characters under license, and so I did this whole series for each of the short vowels, A, E, I, O, U, and we did a short vowels, and then we did long vowels with Winnie the Pooh, and then I did a sing consonants with Winnie the Pooh, and it ended up being about 7 or 8 in the series that I wrote songs, and I used music. I wrote songs to teach these skills. But there was dialogue, and early on I wrote the screenplay or the dialogue, but it became better that somebody else started to write that. So the dialogue was there, and then I just popped the songs in like a little mini opera or something like that.
You know, you don't know this. I'm telling you this for the first time, but I was actually up for that exact same job, but I was having some hearing issues back then, and the first song I wrote was about long vowels, and totally missed out on. And they said, "John, it's not about vowels. It's vowels."
Vowels, yeah.
And I said, "Oh, you need to talk to my friend Dan Crow. He's got a bunch of songs that he wrote that I just learned about in an interview I did with him."
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a long vowel.
There really isn't. It's better than a short vowel, I would assume.
Short vowels are good
Unless
too.
you're in a hurry, but that's a whole different story.
Short vowels.
I would say, but talk about.
Sorry, I bumped you out of that job. By the way, I apologize.
That's okay. I've moved into a whole different things with euplonics or something. I got that wrong too. The writing the songs though, when you were teaching in it's Appalachia, isn't it, or Appalachia?
Appalachia.
Really prepared you for that stuff with Disney.
Sure, absolutely, and all those in those songs, but working with the Walt Disney Educational Media Company for those 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years, whatever it was, we did a lot of projects. But right when that was happening, the producers over there Disney had decided they wanted to start the Disney Channel, Now the Disney Channel hadn't
Yeah.
begun yet, so they asked me. We wanted to make a presentation to the powers that be over at Disney. So we had to go over to the Disney studios and make a presentation, a pitch for the Disney Channel. And the show we were pitching was a Winnie the Pooh show called Welcome to Pooh. It ended up being called Welcome to Pooh Corner, but I had to take over. I had to write a song. Went to him live, and the guy that sang the song, because the characters sing the music. The voice characters, the voice actors are the ones that do the voices and the singing of the songs. Whoever does Winnie the Pooh, and at that time it was Hal Smith who was doing Winnie the Pooh, and Hal is well known as Otis, the town drunk from the Andy Griffith Show. So I had been working with Hal for a couple of years on these educational projects, for the Winnie the Pooh series, and so he knew how I wrote, and I wrote for I wanted to write it for as comfortable as I could be for him to sing, because he's not a professional singer, but he can sing in character. And so I worked with him long enough that we began to have a good relationship on writing together, working it together. So I went in and actually played the song guitar when he sang it to the powers that be at the Disney offices in a big conference.
The audition, cool.
Yeah, and that was part of the pitch to start the Disney Channel. So that I was very memorable thinking back on it now, that was so cool, and it was effective. They dug it, and then they figured out, well, let's go with it. So that's how. I just
realized as you were talking where I went wrong with the because. In the back of my mind was Pooh, and then of course it went to the long. But now all of a sudden makes perfect sense to me. They say it's better to listen than to talk.
Well, it's the bow and then the Pooh, and so you see, we're all.
Well, I just went, how hard could this be?
Yeah, too bad you just missed your mark on that one, John.
Close, but I'm glad that was a successful time for you. And you wrote a lot of. How many songs do you think you wrote during that time?
Oh gosh, about 100 maybe. There was I'm not sure exactly how many, but
a lot.
That was fun. They'd give you a script it was 2 shows I worked on: Welcome to Pooh Corner and Dumbo's Circus, which stretched out over a few years. So they did they did Pooh Corner, and they would just call you in, and there was staff writers, so there was Robin Fredericks, who and Phil Barron and Will Ryan and and a lot of these voiceover actors that we have come into that started out with these shows, like Jim Cummings and all these great, and Steve Gillette. He was when he wrote some songs for there. So we were all staff songwriters. So they just give us a script and say, and we'd go over to the studios and pick up from the offices with the producers of the show. It wasn't Disney Studios. It was, it was shopped out. And then you go over to Left Coast Television is who did it. And you go over and pick up a script. And then they say, we need 3 songs in this script to fit into it. And they're only about 2 minutes each, the songs were. So then you just go home and write these little tunes that would fit right into the dialogue of the show, which was really fun. Because when you had all those dialogue, that language, all those that around it, it made it kind of easier to put a song in there, because you had stuff to work from. Because you want to keep the show moving. And then John Debney was arranged the music, and John Debney is still a very successful music scorer for films, over the years.
When you surround yourself with good people, you know what you get?
Yeah, you get a good product. I don't know.
Yeah. Except for the guy that wrote the long vowel song.
That guy, yeah. The long vowel one.
The vowely boy. So after Disney So how long did that period of your
That was through most of the 80s, I'd
to the
say.
80s? Yeah.
Yeah, because it started about 82 and then it ran all the way through about 88 or something like
Now,
that.
were you touring at this time, or
I wasn't really let's see, let me think. I was doing like you, I was doing a lot of shows, but they were in elementary schools around Los Angeles mostly because we were so busy, as you know, at that time. The schools all wanted assemblies. So you know, you just were working steady and solid every year. And I didn't get it, I hadn't really stretched out onto the whole road yet. But around that time, it was about 88, when I was doing something with can't remember how it happened. One of the producers of a movie over at Columbia Pictures, not Disney, but Columbia, said he were fans of mine. Their kids were, because you know how that is. The children are the ones that love your music, and if they love you, then their parents love you because their kids love you. And you know, that was so
unless they don't like their kids.
Unless they don't, exactly.
But
And
for the most part, let's just assume they did.
in this case, they did. I think.
Yeah, good.
I don't know, maybe not. They said, but they said, well, can you maybe we'd like to talk to you about doing this song for this movie called The Adventures of Milo and Otis. It was a cat and a dog, you know, adventure.
Yeah.
And I got the information about, went over to Columbia and I talked to them about it, and they gave me sent me home with a film clip of the movie, but there was no sound on it. It had nothing on it. It had no effects or anything, no music. And we watched the movie at home, Lucinda and I did, and they said, well, the song they wanted to use had already been written by another writer, and he was in North Carolina, Dick, gosh, I remember his last name. Anyway, he had written it and it had been recorded by Raffi. And at that time, Raffi was really quite popular up in Canada and around the country for that.
He was
the United States. So
piece of children's music for a long time.
Exactly. And so Raffi was big in that. And this song was, I suspect they probably even approached him about doing the song first before they contacted me. I'm sure they did, but he didn't do it. He turned it down, thank goodness. But I did it. And then when I heard the song, they wanted to get it rewritten for the movie, so it fit the film better. So they did it. When they did it, they sent it to me, the version that this guy had rewritten in North Carolina of his own song, but it didn't work. It was off. The rhyming was off. The meter was off. And I said, may I have permission to just do a rewrite on some of the lyrics, keeping the same melody? And I did.
We're gonna take a walk outside today. Gonna see what we can find today. We're gonna take a walk outside today. Gonna see what we can find today. On a pretty little farm, the sun comes up on a curious cat and a pug-nosed pup.
And in fact, you know who was the one that I worked with on doing that was Bones Howe, who was the famous producer and engineer guy. He happened to be the music supervisor at Columbia at that time. So I got to have several meetings with Bones, and I was, of course, in awe because I'm dealing with the guy that produced the Mamas and Papas, and and Jan and Dean, and this guy is just everything he touched turned to gold practically, and so it was cool to be able to get his advice and work with him as I rewrote the song. But I did rewrite it for the movie, and then I performed it for the movie. So at the opening credits and closing, so it worked really well, I think. And
the movie was very successful.
Yeah, it was, and there were no actors in the movie. It was all animals, and Dudley Moore did his hilarious narration through the film. That was really, so it was a magical movie. I really think it still holds up. It's like one of those evergreens that will be around forever. I think.
Wonder how many Milo and Otises they used.
Yeah. Oh, I did worry about that they were mistreating some of the animals, but I did get I got plenty of evidence that they were all taken care of. They lived on this island that the director owned off the coast of Japan, mainland Japan,
Mhm.
and they were all had hundreds of cats and hundreds of Otises and hundreds of Milos that were in the movie, and they all lived happy lives on a couple farms he owned and land he had there on that island in Japan.
There's some contract guy in Disney going, he bought it.
Yeah, I know exactly. Well, it was Columbia. So, but anyway, yeah, no, I know. I worried about it when I saw some of the scenes. I thought, oh my golly, this cat's jumping off a cliff, and he's okay. But,
The river stuff, and
oh yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on, and there are other animals like bears and foxes and things.
Nobody did that. Nobody did that kind of stuff like Disney. I remember the stories. Perry the squirrel, the flying squirrel, and you'd hear these stories afterwards. Oh, we went through a lot of Perrys. Yeah, they get stuck up in the air conditioning units. It goes, okay, stop right there.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to hear anymore. Or whatever happened to Haley Mills? There you go.
Yeah, right. Whatever happened to Janet Monroe? I remember her she was one of my favorites as a kid.
Janet Monroe,
Barbie
yeah,
O'Gill and the Little People in Swiss Family
Chris
Robinson.
Family Robinson.
Had a crush on her.
O'Gill had
When I was
Sean Connery, right?
Yeah, that was a lot of it was first movie that Sean Connery sang in. The only one he ever sang in was that movie Darby O'Gill and the Little People, when he sang, "Oh, she is my dear, my darling one, her eyes so sparkling full of fun, no other could match the likes of her."
Oh, she is my dear, my darling one, her eyes so sparkling full of fun, no other can match the likes of her. She is my dear.
I remember that.
There's a good reason. He turned down my bowel song too, and otherwise, maybe
Too bad.
James Bond wouldn't have worked.
It'll still come around again. You don't worry
I hope
about
so. Everything does come around, doesn't it?
it. Yeah, right. Get your.
So after the Disney episodes, you started touring more, I assume.
Yeah, right around that time, I met this was cool. This is this like you talked about earlier about people you meet and luck, just in the business. And because I met that Elise Vosberg, it helped me get to Disney, and then that all led to years and years of work with them. And then the producer that saw me and his kids loved me for the movie, but then around that time, I got to be I don't know how I met her, but you remember Jimmy Webb, the songwriter, who famous.
You want me to sing MacArthur Park, the entire long version for you right now?
Yes, would you please? Let's take that break right now and have an interlude.
All the sweet green eyes. Richard Harris, ladies and gentlemen.
And I'll do by the time I get to Phoenix while you're doing that. and my up and away in my beautiful balloon.
He's still going, by the way, Jimmy Webb.
Yes, he is. Yeah. And but I met his sister, Susan Webb, and we
Spider?
We kind of hit it off. She was a supporter of mine, like what I did. Yeah. And so she arranged for me to meet a booking agent out of New York City, Vivian Nevis from VNI, and they were working with Reggie and Kim Harris a lot at that time. Maybe, and you remember, them, or the Harris. Yeah. Anyway, they were doing a lot of shows with Reggie and Kim, and she was booking them, and she was booking Orson Bean. I remember he was. Oh, and Don McLean.
Yeah.
So she wanted to, because Reggie and Kim were doing a lot of family shows and kids shows, she wanted another children's artist, and so she signed me to be a booking. So I got to do a lot of traveling and performances around the country for her. Really cool venues.
Were they schools or theaters or
theaters? Yeah, and that was fantastic, because we were a lot of the like a lot of smaller cities like Lubbock, Texas, or Abilene, or they all have these wonderful cultural arts centers in the middle of the downtown. There was a lot of urban renewal going on at that time, so they were building up their downtown areas, and so I got to hit a lot of those cool theaters and stuff and like that. Well, I know what happened. Then I got connected with the Department of Defense military schools overseas, because that came from doing all these
The
concerts.
military rears its ugly head once
Came
again.
back into my life. and that really took off in about the mid 80s. And I just went, well, you remember Performing Tree that we worked for in LA, and one of the directors of Performing Tree used to teach in the military schools.
Mhm.
So she knew how that worked. And so she arranged for myself and a visual artist to go over to Europe, first for 6 weeks to go to Germany, tour around Germany, and do all these concerts on these bases, military posts and bases. And that was a wonderful time. And then as an extension of that, I got to go over to Asia and do some shows over there.
Mhm.
And that started it. Once that kicked into gear, that's still going on. And up until COVID, it was going on strong. I was hitting all over Europe, all over the world, Iceland, Japan, the Philippines. I mean,
Wow, that's great.
everywhere. And that was really the kind of traveling that I was enjoying doing, because you're getting to go overseas and you get to meet a lot of really good people on the bases and the military families and things too. So that
Over in Iceland, was the audience pretty cold?
they were they were slow to warm up to my material, but they finally did get it. They were little they had all these. I love the little traditions of the foods and the kind of things they have in these different countries, So when I think of Iceland, I think of a lot of little, like, rotted shark they would serve you. I don't know if that was a joke or not. But I ate it. And there's this little drink called Black Death or something. I had a little sip of that. This is all crazy.
That was from the Middle Ages left over.
Exactly. The Viking cuisine.
And you got to sightsee and see some beautiful sights, I would think, all over the world.
Yeah, and made a lot of good friends that are still friends too. And what's cool is a lot of these people would go, they get stationed all over the place. So they get moved around every few years. So they might go from Germany to Japan to the Philippines or to Italy or Spain. And so you get to go follow them. They want to have you come and perform at their school because they remember you from their other school. And then they come back to the States because there's the bases here in the United States. So they'll bring you to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, or wherever.
Before we jump to what your latest enjoyment is there anything I've missed or any highlights you'd like to discuss?
No, I think pretty much hitting all the Disney stuff and the performing. Like you, I've done Australia and New Zealand. But we've done thousands of shows. Probably what do we calculate? 8,000, probably 9,000 shows.
Yeah, I stopped counting at 8,000, and it's pretty much what is that called? That 10,000 hours that the Beatles did, and you hit the ground running. They didn't come from nowhere.
That's right. Yeah,
totally
that was
for
the Outliers, the book.
Outliers, exactly right. Great book.
The Malcolm Gladwell book. I read that a couple times and unfortunately that term is misused. I feel nowadays, outliers, like they're unusual or different kinds of people, or iconoclasts. But that's not what that book was about. It was about what you said. It was about hockey players or musicians or people or computer geniuses. Right. That spend that 10,000 hours to perfect. And we just did it because we were working all the time. We did it naturally. It was, it just kind of happened, those 10,000 hours.
It's daunting if you think about it,
Yeah, it is. Exactly. No kidding. Yeah. And then, then you just, and you meet people like our good friend Steve Bedell, who was so instrumental in it as my manager, because he picked me up in 1992 or 91, 92 when I met Steve. And he was one of those people that embraced my career and then pushed it forward and took me on into other paths I never would have ever dreamed of going into.
And he came out of music for films and whatnot, right?
Yeah, he was the music like Bones Howe was the music supervisor at Columbia Pictures. Steve was the music supervisor at Paramount for all through the 80s and into the 90s. And prior to that, I know he worked with Casablanca Records and helped get them launched and going with, with Wes Farrell and those guys. But he was instrumental. He's the guy that produced, was supervised all the music for all those great films like Top Gun and the original Top Gun and, Beverly Hills Cop and Flashdance and Footloose and all those great films in the 80s. And so when he took me under his wing, I was really excited because then he did a lot of stuff to help push me forward, to get me signed with Sony Records, because I did record for Rounder. I did 3 albums for Rounder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you were on one of them, the Hanukkah one, and then we did a couple others. But then I went to Sony, and that was Steve that kind of got me on the deal with Sony, which lasted for a few years because they were trying to tap into the kids' music successes that Raffi was having. They wanted to get to that level, so they signed 4 or 5 artists, myself and Tom Chapin was one of them, and Tom Paxton too, to start a children's label. And that was
who wrote that great song, the slow song on the Hanukkah at Home album.
That beautiful one called Family Time.
Family Time, yeah. It was. They use it a lot as a dirge, don't they? In parades.
It was the same guy that wrote the Long Bowel song.
That guy, yeah.
I'm trying to remember who that was.
But, Family Time.
Family Time was a gorgeous, beautiful piece of music.
It's been covered by nobody.
Yeah, it's been covered by a bedspread.
By a bedspread, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. So pick that album up and have that Family Time on.
Hey John, that album's still out there. Hanukkah at Home, it's still out there.
Hanukkah at Home is still out
around.
And you can pick that up in a bargain bin with Milo and Otis, the movie.
That's right.
It's a double bill. So
get your old Winnie the Pooh. Get your old VHSs of Welcome to Pooh Corner.
I actually have a VHS player. I think I have one of the.
I think I might have one too. I think we all have one in our basement or
garage. I got one somewhere.
I mentioned that when I was doing that Winnie the Pooh thing, the Welcome to Pooh Corner, there was a video store right down, and we lived in Manhattan, in Hermosa Beach, California at the time, and there was a video store in Manhattan Beach, and I would go in there all the time to buy videos, Westerns mostly because I love Westerns, but when one of those shows came out on videotape, I went in there to buy a copy of the Welcome to Pooh Corner on VHS. And Quentin Tarantino, speaking of him, we were throwing back to what we were talking about earlier with
that's right.
He was working in that video store. He was 19 years old or something, I think, then. And so I used to hang out and go and talk to him about Westerns and argue about whether Rio Bravo was any good or not. I remember that.
Too bad his career never took off, huh?
I know. I felt bad for him because I thought he had a lot of talent.
And once again, the people it's one thing about the LA area. People that you run in.
Well, look at you. I mean, we did those birthday parties forever, whatever, 10 years. And, you did parties for everybody. And so did I. I did, Charles Bronson and Jill Ireland's little girl's birthday party and the cast of Days of Our Lives. And
did he have a mechanic party? The
mechanic party. Actually, I think it was the Watermelon Man party or Mr. Melon.
With the harmonica. Everybody had a harmonica in their
Definitely, yeah.
bag. Yeah, we did a bunch of those celebrity parties. And funny, you didn't know, and sometimes you didn't know until you showed up, who the
That's
people
true.
were. You get
Yeah.
passed around to different.
Yeah, and all you did and we did is we didn't do the whole party. We didn't cater the party. We were just entertainment. So
Entertainment, yeah.
you might sit down on the floor in the living room with a bunch of kids and sing to them while the parents are out talking and chatting away and stuff, and
Yeah.
do your half hour or 45-minute show, and then go to another party.
On to the next one.
Exactly.
Did, two or three of those shows a day, and it
Yeah.
kept us going through those
Boy, no kidding.
the
That's for
Dust Bowl period.
Yeah, that's right.
So long
Gosh,
as funny you brought up about the Westerns and Quentin Tarantino in the store, but as long as I've known you, you've been a Western fan, and you had a group played in clubs doing Western songs for the most part. I mean, you did other stuff.
oh yeah, yeah.
But for the most part, you did a lot of Western tunes. But now you kind of come full circle with your love of Westerns and moving back to moving to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and getting entrenched there with the Historic Society. Is kind of you're really enjoying it and doing some terrific things, terrific people.
Oh yeah, this is really, gosh, it's just sort of happened, kind of just came out of, I don't know, it was a natural phenomenon.
Out of the bowels of Las Cruces.
Out of the bowels, exactly. That was because I always loved the history of the Old West, especially the history. Like you, I always, growing up, I always loved the songs that Johnny Horton used to sing about Western characters, like the Battle of New Orleans and Comanche, You Brave Horse, and Jim Bridger, let's drink to old Jim Bridger, lift your vassals high, and then Johnny Cash and all that, those guys singing those ballads and Westerns, and Marty Robbins. And so I always enjoyed that Western music and loved it as a kid too, growing up with Westerns and cowboy stuff. And so then when we moved here, it just naturally happened. Years ago, I met Patsy Garrett, who is the granddaughter of Pat Garrett, the famous Western sheriff, the guy that shot Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
And but he had a lot more going. He was a lot more famous for a lot of other things other than that, and a really remarkable Western figure. And talking to his granddaughter and getting to know her and her memories of her that her dad told her about, her grandfather, that was so cool. And then that kind of got me rolling on this. And then this area of Las Cruces is where Billy the Kid was tried, and where Pat Garrett was the county sheriff here for about several years, and so it's all that rich history is here, and it relates to not just that the Billy the Kid, Pat Garrett thing, but the fountains and Albert Fall, who was the Secretary of the Interior under Harding and got in trouble. That's where the term Fall Guy came from, because he went to prison during the Teapot Dome scandal. So all this history's just really rich here. And in fact, so I got, because of all of this, I met all of these writers and historians that are good friends. And one of them, she and I realized we wrote a song together, and a Spanish song called Querida Esposa, which is called his dear husband or dear wife, esposo or esposa. And so we just wrote this little song together, and we thought, well, we sound kind of interesting and good together. So why don't we start singing more together and do these Western songs, these historic things? And that's how it started. And I know she's, and so we've been doing concerts together. We just did one a couple weeks ago, did two in the last month, and have just booked another 3 or 4 coming up in the summer. So this has taken me in a whole other direction.
A whole other genre. Did you have a picture, a backdrop of
yeah, let me show you.
Right?
Carla, right? It's Crow and Carla is what we go by.
Yeah.
And hold on a second. I think I have this here. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
This is cool. I can do this effect here. Okay, let me show you.
You're a master of technology, from what I understand.
Thank you. Oh, here she is. This is
there we go.
This is she and I in our Western garb with my hat
that's
on.
great. That's great. And
This
where
is,
is that picture taken?
that's the jailhouse. Oh, sorry, I'll move this out of the way. That's the jail where Billy the Kid was held here in Las Cruces when he was being tried, and so our friend owns the little jail cell. It's in a little hut behind the museum, and it's always locked up. It's hard to get in to see, but you can see I'm wearing a Pat Garrett T-shirt. History,
Yeah.
And that's Carla and I. Anyway, so she's a really wonderful historian too. She's got a lot of great history in this area because she grew up in El Paso and Las Cruces, and so, and we did a concert over in Tombstone in November where we had a lot of people that were connected with the Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, those kinds of characters from that area, and then one of my good friends is a writer of native. For native culture, especially the Chiricahua Apache. He's an expert on the Chiricahua Apache. So he's got a new book coming out that's a thorough history of the Chiricahua, which includes Geronimo and Cochise and all these, crazy, wonderful historic figures. So that all connects. And we're always busy with this. We're going out to another site in 2 weeks. One of my buddies just wrote a book called The Trial of Billy the Kid, which was made into a play, and we performed it. We put on a festival here in Las Cruces a couple weeks ago called the Billy the Kid Festival, and we did The Trial of Billy the Kid, and then Carla and I did a concert together with a couple other musician friends here in town. So, and then I'm going over to Fort Sumner for Old Fort Days, which is where Billy the Kid is buried. That's where he was shot by Pat. And I'm going to do a concert over there in June, and then I'm July, and so and all of this stuff.
Take it off.
Yeah, and if you look, we showed the movie Young Guns at the festival. Anybody that's seen Young Guns, they'll kind of get an idea of that whole, Billy the Kid thing that's going on, Pat Garrett. So
I'm writing a children's show. It's a kind of a Western. It's a pseudo Western. It's called Billy the Kidney. And one of his best friends is Larry the Liver Spots. And I try to, educate. And I'm trying to rewrite the bowel song that I think will fit.
You won't give up on that. I'm glad to hear.
No, it's undetermined, bound and determined. We're getting sponsorship from Xlax.
Oh, great! That's good thinking right there.
That's good sponsorship, but you know how they are; they're pretty smooth. So we'll see.
All I can say is run with it. I'm
going to run with it as fast as I can to the nearest place that you run to during those conditions. So, if people want to contact you or websites, where do they find you? Where can they book you for the Western stuff?
We did an album. We did an album of the Western songs, by the way, that's called Sidekicks and Saddle Pals. And darn, I've
heard that. It's great album.
Hey, thank you. And that was all those Western songs, And then we're doing another one because I've got the material together to start working on another album to do that. So that isn't children's stuff. So I did put it out under the name Dan Robert Crow, which is my middle name, because I wanted to distinguish it from the Dan Crow music for kids, because I didn't want people to, hear that and think it's one of my kids' albums, because it's definitely not. It talks about outlaws and gunfights a little bit, stuff like that. So I didn't want to confuse my family audience with that stuff. So that's that. And then of course we have I do have my website still, dancrow.com, which is, all my children's stuff and everything. Okay. Carla and I are putting together a website for our Western thing. We're called Crow and Carla. Mm-hmm. That's the go by, and we call it Sing the Legend is the name of the show.
Oh, the C and the K, I get it.
Yeah, and they sound the same. It goes back to Kiss a Cow, right?
There you are. See,
like we talked about earlier. And and then of course we have you and I and Lucinda and Bonnie have our kidsmusic.com, kids KIDZ music.com website. And so I'm just building up the Western stuff right now.
Sure.
our album, by the way, is number 12 on the Cowboy and Western charts. It was as of
With a bullet?
Yes, I hope. Yeah, bullet. So anyway, they were going, and that's been a blessing. Everybody's starting to catch on a little, but we don't know. We'll just keep doing what we love doing. That's it.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, going back historically through the Dan Crow saga, things have come into your life and moved in other different areas, and it's been a great trip so far. And I'm looking forward to what's next in the Dan Crow saga. They're going to be like the people will be looking back on them like the Viking Chronicles, and
like in Iceland with the Black Death and the rotted shark.
Wow, you've hardly touched your rotted shark. Maybe have a nice drink of Black Death. Thank you for being on my inaugural episode, and I'm sure me and the cats will have you back. They're booking. Oh, geez, don't do that.
Yeah, tell them I said howdy.
They're booking. They're my booking agents. But thanks so much, and we'll be back with you, ladies and gentlemen. The immortal Dan Crow.
Iconic.
Ironic.
Thanks, John.
See you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.
And that was Johnny on the Spot. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Bob Fitzsimmons is coming to town. Bob Fitzsimmons gonna put you down. Bob Fitzsimmons is coming to town today.